Populist parties have been growing in strength across Europe, emboldened by both Brexit and President Trump. There's Marine Le Pen and the National Front in France, of course, but there's a critical election before that. Next month in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, who leads the Freedom Party, is hoping to top the ballot. He wants to take the country out of the EU and to de-Islamize the Netherlands with a ban on immigration from Muslim countries. In 2016, he was convicted of inciting discrimination. The Dutch coalition system means it's unlikely Wilders will be crowned Prime Minister, but he could end up leading the largest party, which would chill European centrists and boost other populist movements throughout the continent. Well, John Sweeney tracked him down.
Nederland. Een schitterend land. Het land van onze voorouders. Het land.
This is the election campaign video of the far-right Dutch Freedom Party.
Ons enige vaderland.
Unsurprisingly, they believe in freedom, independence and the future.
Van onze onafhankelijkheid.
On Brexit, they say the British did it, and the Americans did it too.
Mark Rutte.
Here's the party's leader and sole member, Geert Wilders.
Aan het eind van deze eeuw.
The map, borrowed perhaps from Dad's army, suggests that by the end of the century there will be 4 billion Africans, and many will make a beeline for the Netherlands. Wilders links refugees, especially Muslim ones, with terror attacks. Go and vote, he concludes, and make the Netherlands ours again. Hello. Geert Wilders, when did you last go for a walk on your own?
On my own? Well, that's something like, wow, 12, 13 years ago. All on my own, drive a car, go do some shopping, or empty my own mailbox at home. Being at my own home is more than 12 years ago, unfortunately. I'm on the death list from, well, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, many of that kind of organizations.
What's the biggest cause by terror of the loss of Dutch lives in the last few years?
Well, we were lucky to not have the kind of attacks that, for instance, Germany, Belgium, France, even the United Kingdom with the London attacks had.
I was thinking about MH17.
Sorry, there?
I was thinking about MH17.
MH17, yes.
193 Dutch people die.
Yes.
They're entirely innocent in a civilian airliner.
That's true.
Shot down.
Sure.
And the prime suspect is Putin's Russia.
Well, we have to see about that. I'm sure it has to be cleared, and I would not bet that Russia had nothing to do with that, but still, let's wait for the prosecutor who is working on it now to handle, but you could be right. I'm not ignoring that.
The Russians Russians say it's the Ukrainians. Either way, 193 people die, they're Dutch, and it has got nothing whatsoever to do with Muslims.
Very true. And we have to see and wait.
Because I don't know. Because there are other dangers in the world, aren't there? There's North Korea, there's Putin's Russia, and there are Islamist extremists, Islamist fascists.
Unfortunately,
so aren't you a bit obsessed with just one element of the spectrum here, which is the Muslim spectrum, while ignoring perhaps Russian fascism?
I tell you, the more that we import Islam, and I'm not talking about all the people. I'm not saying once again that all the people are extremist people, but the ideology and freedom are incompatible. So we are facing an existential problem here. If we allow to open our borders, if we allow to ignore the problems that we are facing today, let alone later in the century with the demographic situation in Africa, we will cease to exist. Our values, our identity will not be taken away by the European Union only, but by the Islamization of our society. And that does not work. And I want it to be stopped. Point.
You believe in the politics of identity, don't you?
Who doesn't?
Well, I suppose the people who believe in liberal democracy, the idea that everybody is equal under the law. It's a different way of looking at the world.
People are equal. Ideologies, values are not equal. Religions are not equal. And what I told you before, the cultural relativists, people who believe that all cultures are equal are the proof of the biggest disease Europe faced in the last decades. Cultural relativists who say Islamic culture is the same as Christianity, allow them and don't demand from them to integrate and to assimilate. This is the worst thing that has happened to us.
Many Dutch find his views not just repellent but dangerous. So will Geert Wilders take power on March 15th? Probably not, as the mainstream parties will do their best to block him. But there's no doubting this man is changing what was once the most liberal country in Europe into something quite different.
That was John Sweeney in The Hague. So, is the talk of populist revolution in Europe overblown? We have had a number of electoral shocks in the last year. Maybe we're in for more. At the moment, Geert Wilders is leading the opinion polls in the Netherlands with 19% of the vote, about 3 points ahead of his nearest rival. And in France, Le Pen is also expected to be ahead in the first round of the presidential election on about 26%. So do these parties really have a chance of winning power? And critically, what is their presence doing to the policies of the moderates? Well, Times columnist David Aronovich, Sarah Hobolt, Professor of European Politics at the London School of Economics, and Yascha Mount, Harvard political theorist, joined Emily Maitlis in our studios to discuss.
Thanks for coming in. And Sarah, I just want you to put this in context for us. We've sort of played around with some of the numbers there of the polls, but how close to power do you believe Wilders is right now?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by power. He is close to being the largest party in the Netherlands, but that doesn't mean he will win a majority. But it does mean that he will be a power to be reckoned with when it comes to coalition formation.
Because he can't be a prime minister, as it were, on his own.
No, so he will not, no party in the Netherlands will win a majority. There will have to be some kind of coalition. And if he's the largest party, it might be that he will be the first person to be asked to form that coalition. So far, the other parties have said, we're not going to want to go into government with you. That doesn't rule out, of course, that there could be another centre-right minority government where he is the main supporting party. We've seen that before between 2010 and 12 in the Netherlands, where his party, Wilders' party, was indeed providing the parliamentary support and gaining concessions like that.
And David, you say that nothing to worry about.
I certainly don't say it's nothing to worry about. My concern is a slightly different one, and it is that we have managed to paint what has happened, happening in Europe, a bit Britain and to a certain extent America as well, as a kind of revolt of a majority. We kind of talk about it as if what you have is something akin to a revolutionary situation with the masses coming down the street like in...
because we call it populism.
In Les Miserables. Partly because we call it populism and so on, but actually when you look at, firstly, the demographics and the continuing demographics of the people who are supporting these parties, they tend to be declining demographics. They are older and so on. They tend to have jobs in industries that are declining and so on. That's the first point about them. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't worry about it. You should worry about it for the reasons I suspect that my colleagues here are going to say you should worry about it, which is the influence that they can have on other parties. And there is, I suppose, and I can't rule out the possibility that somebody like Marine Le Pen will win, but actually they're pretty much blocked out at about 25%. And in some places we get very, very uptight about, like in Germany with the Alternative für Deutschland. You're talking about a party that never really gets above 12% in the polls. Now that will give them representation, but it won't give them any more representation than the Linke party, the left party, had much in the last election, and we never even noticed it.
Yes, is that right, that they might be influencing other mainstream parties, but they in themselves are not actually a threat? Do you find that?
They're certainly influencing other mainstream parties, and we're already seeing that effect reflected in European politics. But no, I worry about them being able to win majorities. Everybody said that Brexit wouldn't happen, and it did. Everybody said that Donald Trump could never get elected, and he did. In countries like Sweden or Germany, 5 or 10 years ago, you had no far-right populist parties strong in the system. Now they are the second biggest party, the third biggest party in polls. I don't think there's an inbuilt limit to this. And when you look at a bunch of broader opinion polls, you see that they do unfortunately represent the majority of the population on many questions. So, for example, most Europeans in every country that was polled a couple of days ago now believe that we should have no further immigration from Muslim-majority countries whatsoever.
Crazy to miss these signals.
No, I mean, again, I completely understand what Yesh is saying, but there's a bit of a danger of saying, we got the, and feeling like this, we got it badly wrong over Brexit. We were bruised over Brexit, you know, pollsters particularly, bruised over Trump. Therefore, in order not to get bruised again, we'll talk up all these other parties and so on. And one of the problems that I have is, we've had an interview, a really good interview here at Wilders. This party of Wilders's was at this level in the polls back in 2013.
Sarah, do you think that the polls do relate to the kind of coverage that these politicians are getting?
I mean, I think there are good reasons for why they're getting coverage, because there has been a sort of step change. And first of all, I don't think that Brexit wasn't predicted by anyone. That's clearly not true. It was a close race all along. Everyone knew it was close. So it's not to, you know, not to say that no one thought this was sort of in the balance. But in terms of they're getting a lot of coverage, I mean, what we are seeing after the financial crisis is there have always been populist parties on the right, but there's really been a step change in how popular they are. And we're not talking about pluralities, but no party win a sort of outright majority. And they have been influential, not only outside government in terms of setting the agenda, and the agenda has shifted in European politics much more towards anti-immigration, Euroscepticism, but also inside government.
Yes, so we started this evening asking, you know, are liberal democracies in Europe actually in permanent decline? There was a time when that question seemed unthinkable, and it doesn't seem very long ago. Do you think they are now?
So in political science, for a long time, people believed that once you're relatively wealthy, you've had a couple of changes of government for free and fair elections, democracy is consolidated, it's safe, it's become the only game in town. And so in some of my recent research, I look at this question. What does it mean for democracy to be the only game in town? Well, at least it has to mean that most citizens give great importance to living in a democracy, that they reject or return alternatives to democracy, and that they don't vote for people who really criticize democracy in a deep way. Now, the World Values Survey shows that that is not true in most countries in North America and Western Europe now. That the number of people who say, you know what, democracy, take it or leave it, is not important to me to live in a democracy, has gone up very rapidly. But the number of people who say...
And these are the young, according to your science, these are the young people saying that. How does that tie in, David, with the idea that the people who are, you know, are in decline, that the people who are voting for these radical
well, I mean, I suppose the question is also from what to what. I mean, one of the key sets of social attitudes, say, in this country is measurable by, would you mind if your child married somebody of another race, and so on. For years and years and years and years, you'd see a majority in this country would say no to that. Gradually, you've seen a majority in the country say they're not bothered by it. And it has not been because old people, by and large, changed their minds. It's because younger people came in with that attitude, gradually developed that attitude, and never lost it.
And I think that younger people are much more polarized. So there's a lot more young people who are very used to multi-ethnic democracies, are used to interacting with people from all kinds of origins and backgrounds and so on. But there's also many young people who very, very fervently reject that. So when you look at France support for the for Le Pen's party, Front National, when you look in Germany support for the Alternative für Deutschland, actually among young people they are especially strong. And I think this is a matter of a long-term transition, that many European democracies were founded as mono-ethnic, monocultural countries. They have over time, often without really thinking about it, become multi-ethnic because of immigration and so on. And a big portion of the population has accepted that, has made their peace with that, has embraced that, celebrates that. But there's also a big portion of the population that says, no, what it means to be Dutch is that you are descended from Dutch people and everything else doesn't count. So the big question of the next 20, 30 years is whether we can get people to broaden their sense of identity. And there's no historical precedent that shows it can be done. It's a new experiment.
Does it feel to you, so like this is still a protest voice, or this is something now able to transform the landscape of Europe over the coming year?
It's clear that the party system in Europe is under some kind of transformation, and that's been going on for a long time, because we've seen this loosening of ties between, you know, established left-wing parties, right-wing parties that had their supporters, and now we have a much more volatile electoral landscapes where people pick and choose, and therefore it's also therefore that parties like Wilders' party have the power to sort of shape a discourse, a narrative, and appeal to a broader range of people, exactly because they don't have these close ties anymore to, you know, a Labour movement or a Christian Democratic movement.
Thank you.
Don't worry, if Britain leaves the European Union, then German car manufacturers will make Angela Merkel give the UK a good trade deal. Well, that claim was made time after time to British voters during last year's EU referendum campaign.